We did the whiskey run and we have to answer a serious question. Does ABV even matter? Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Beaver and today we are talking about whether ABV or whether the ABV that you distill your product at actually makes a difference. So we did our whiskey run. The whiskey run in front of us was taken off the still at 92% for the 4 shots in heads. If you want to see how I compress my heads, I did a video up here, this side, where I show you how I use reflux to compress my 4 shots of my heads, as well as get a cleaner hard cut. We took the 4 shots off at 92%. We then took the majority of the hearts off at 80%, and we ended up with a tails jar at 30 and 1 jar at absolutely 0. Let's get into blending these babies in and see how much of these tails we're going to add. We're going to proof it down, do some tasting, and then we'll get into the question, does ABV matter? With the bulk of the whiskey now proofed down to 50%, it's time for the taste and smell and feedback on what flavors we got out of this. If you don't know what whiskey we have here, check out the video up here. It is one of our all grain whiskeys that we did with some cornflakes and some specialty grains, and we also smoked some of the grains. So yeah, go check out the video there. Let's quickly check if some of that smoke smell or that smoke aroma or flavor came through on the finished product. If you're wondering why I have this jar here, this has now been proofed down to 20%, and we're going to add a wood stave into that. We checked out the video that I did where we tested different ABVs and flavor, or the flavor impact at different ABVs from your wood. Check out the video up here, another quite interesting one. And I like the sweet flavors that came off at 20%. This will be used later to proof these down to about 45%. Let's quickly get a taste and smell of the 50% product, and then we're going to add our wood in and get it to age. Now off the still, when I was distilling this, it had really sweet, malty, sugary flavors coming off. The cut jar stood for a while, allowing some of those volatile flavors to come off. I capped them up and then got into the video, and the moment I opened those lids, a smell rushed up. Yeah, it was licorice. So you know that sweet black licorice, licorice all sorts, that kind of licorice sweetness came off when I opened up the jars to start blending them together, and that was quite surprising to me. So now that it's been proofed down, that licorice smell is still there, but it's nice, and in the background you can smell the grain. There's a nice grain flavor in here. You can definitely smell the wheat flavors. It's that robust sweetness from wheat. Okay, if you've ever had dried Kellogg's, that sweet but not sugary sweet flavor of a dried Kellogg's flake, sure, it's nice. So I don't know if it's from the wheat malt or it's from the malt extract that they coat Kellogg's with to give it that nice and non-artificial sweetness flavor. This is a really good white dog. So I just walked off screen to get my wife to taste this. As I was walking over, that smoky flavor came at the end. It's not campfire smoke, it's not cigarette ash smoke, almost like a burnt marshmallow over an open fire, and you just get that hint of smoke. It's not overly aggressive, but it's nice and sweet, finishing with a little bit of charred sugar, so that almost bitter note. Very glad smoke came through, and after adding wood to these babies, I do believe a lot of other good flavors will come through. I'm very excited about this one. Let's get the wood in, get the caps on, and get it aging, because I think this is going to make an awesome whiskey in a couple of months. So for the aging, what we are going to be doing is, like I said, the 20% ABV to pull out those sweet caramel flavors from that American toasted white oak. So small stave toasted at 220 degrees for about 3 hours. For the big jar over here, so this is roughly a 1 liter jar, we are adding untoasted, uncharred American white oak, 1 small piece of toasted and charred American white oak, and then 1 toasted at 220 degrees white oak, American white oak. Yes, it's a lot of wood for 1 liter of product, but I want that nice big wood impact and that tannic note to pull through. And then for the other jar, what we're going to do is we are going to be adding some cherry wood chips that has been charred. So let's get the cherry wood chips in there. Now just a quick side note, if you ever age with chips instead of staves, remember that you have a larger surface area when you age with chips, and your wood impact will be drastically different. Keep in mind when you're adding your chips to use less than you think, because the wood impact, like I said, is quite massive on chips if you compare it to your normal staves. So yeah, these are going to go onto the shelf for a couple of months, and then we're going to test it. There is a tasting video coming up soon. If you don't want to miss it, remember to hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, and you will be notified the moment I upload that video. Now for the part of the video that you guys actually tuned in for. Does ABV matter? Now the ABV in question is the ABV you take your product off at your still. Now when I started this hobby, I was taught that you need to distill at a high ABV and then proof your product down. And when I say high ABV, I mean between 60 and 80%, because that's where you get your best flavors. Now I never question that, and thanks to the channel, I'm getting to answer questions and ask questions that I would have never asked if I did not have my channel. I started doing the research on this and started with how we smell and why we smell and why do things smell and all that other fun stuff. Now the reason why we smell stuff and we perceive smell and taste is because stuff is in a constant state of decay, meaning that it is deteriorating and giving off flavors. In thinking about that, what I did is I delved into why things start smelling and so on and so forth. If you really want to geek out to this, I will put a couple of links of videos and a couple of Wikipedia links down here from which I got all my research and all the information. What we are looking at is what's referred to as volatile aromatic compound. So what those are is a whole bunch of different chemical bonds that produce your smell or your flavor or a scent or whatever you want to call it. There's a whole bunch of different ones. There's alcohols, acetaldehydes, esters, ketones, lactones, toluenes, miscellaneous compounds. Like I said, if you want to geek out, links down in the description and you can read up all about this. Now what that basically means is each of those compounds has a different chemical structure. Thus, they have a different strength of chemical bond. So that means they will be released out of whatever liquid you have at different stages. And we as distillers, we try and play with that combination of flavors to pull off different flavors. Why distill at a high ABV or a higher ABV and not just at 40% if you want a 40% rum? There's nothing wrong at distilling at 40%. If I, for instance, did this whiskey that we just tasted at 40%, the flavor profile will be hugely different. Let me explain. We have ABV. No, not ABL, it's ABV. Okay, so we have ABV. Now, if we take a product off at the still at 60% ABV, this means, just basically, there's a lot of other stuff involved, but basically means that you have 60% ethanol and you have 40% water. Yes, there's a lot of other stuff mixed in between there, but at the end of the day, it's 60% ethanol and 40% water. Now, water is a much stronger chemical bond and it has stronger connections between the carbon and the hydrogen atoms and that type of stuff. Thus, it pulls more of your compounds over into your final distillate. So those are aromatic compounds. So the higher your water content becomes, the more flavor you are going to pull from your wash. But it's not necessarily the flavors you want. And remember, when I'm talking about flavor now, I'm not talking about the intensity of the flavor. Because while we are distilling, we are intensifying specific flavors or specific aromatic compounds to ensure that we get a specific flavor profile out. So when I say flavor, I mean the mixture of flavors. Let's make a graph of this. So what we have here is a graph of one leg has flavor, the other leg is ABV. So if we start with 0 here and 100% ABV there, what we have is at about 10% we have our wash. Now our wash is a combination of a multitude of different flavors within that wash. The moment we start distilling it and we start increasing the ABV, what we are doing is we are gradually removing flavors. So the higher the ABV becomes, the less of those mixture of flavors we are pulling out and the more of concentrated other flavors we are pulling in. Now, if you think about vodka, for instance, that we distill at as higher ABV as possible, so 95% and higher, to get it as close to azeotrope as possible so we can remove as much flavor as possible, because like I said before, ethanol is not a good carrier of flavor because the chemical bond in it is very weak, where water has a stronger chemical bond. So the less water, the more flavor. The less water, the less flavor we have. If you take your wash and you start distilling it, like I said, you're going to start removing other flavors or the mixture of flavors. And what will happen is, let's say at this point here, at roughly about 30% ABV, you'll still have a large combination of flavors pulling through, so you might get a lot of the wash flavors pulling through in your distillate. If you go, let's say, to 50%, you will have a little bit less of those combination of flavors. So you might get a bit of apple coming through, or banana, or whatever, when you're doing a wash. Like we did with this rum wash here, when we took it off the still, the flavors were all sweet and, yeah, almost caramelized sugar kind of sweetness and that kind of stuff. It left in the jar for a little bit, it cooled down, those flavors got combined back together, and all of a sudden we got licorice. If we distilled it at a lower ABV, would we have got those flavors? The chances are we wouldn't have. We as distillers will distill off at 60 to 80%, so around about here, or 60 to 80, I don't know where 80 is, but yeah, around about here, that will be 80, so 60 to 80%. That will give us the best kind of flavors. Now, if you've ever distilled before and you take your back set out, even if it's on a stripping run or a spirit run, the back set smells completely different to the smell of the wash going in. Now the reason for that is you didn't add anything, you removed flavor. So what was left over is your less volatile, sour smelling chemicals. Now, I don't know what the chemical compounds of those are. If you know, pop it down in the comment section. But those less volatile, sour smells, those ones are the ones that are left over in the backset. The more sweety, more flavorful, estery flavors that you pulled off, those ones came off first. So the flavor left over in your backset is sour. The flavor you got coming out of your distillate was sweet. Now that's exactly what this curve represents. So you left some of these sour flavors, and here you got sweet flavors. Logic just dictates the lower you go, the more of the flavor you're going to pull, and you might get sour flavors. So that's why when you start going into your tails, so your tails generally are lower in the ABV, so you start getting those funky, sour smelling, almost moldy, wet cardboard, that kind of wet dog smells. So the bad smells. Because you are lowering the ABV of the product, you're getting more water, and the water carries those funny, funky flavors over. And that's why we distill at a high ABV. So if you guys want me to do a complete video where I take one single wash and distill it at different ABVs and give you guys flavor feedbacks, please pop it down in the comments and I will gladly do that. So what we'll do is we'll make a massive wash, we'll strip it all out, and then we will add that stripped product into the still and distill it off at different ABVs to see what kind of flavor impacts we get. If you guys want to see that, remember, hit it down in the comments or give a like to this video so I know that you guys want more of this kind of content. If you have any questions on the higher the ABV type of stuff, yes, please hit it down in the comments once again. My recommendation for ABVs for different products. So let's start with a fruit brandy. So fruit brandy, here in South Africa, that's not a T, that's an I. Okay. So here in South Africa, we call it brandewyn, or if you just have the raw product, it's mampoer, depending on if it's grapes. If it's grape, it's Witblits, but yeah, let's just not go into that. Whiskey, and then vodka. If we take it off for a fruit brandy, I would suggest you go between 60 to 80% ABV. My sweet spot for fruit brandies is roughly in the middle here at about 70%. Reason for that is you do get a lot of sour kind of flavors coming off of your fruit brandy. If you take it off at a nice high ABV during your hearts, some of those nice sour flavors will come through in your tails, and you might want to add those back in, or else that flavor is going to be spread out through the whole center of the product. And yeah, so my experience, 60 to 80% gives me a good quality product, with 70% being what I shoot for. If you go into a whiskey, now whiskeys, we go from about 60% to about 90%, depending on what kind of flavors you have in your wash. I generally shoot for on my whiskeys, once again, for about 70-75, sometimes a bit higher, but from 60 to 90% on my whiskeys, depending on what kind of whiskey it is and what kind of flavors my wash smells like. I then decide if I want to take it off a bit higher, so I get not as much of that grain funk and that type of stuff. Yeah, but like I said, if you guys want a full video on the different flavors we'll pull off, yeah, just hit it down in the comments. And then for vodka, now remember, vodka, you want to be neutral. You don't want any flavor in the vodka unless you like flavorful vodkas. That's up to you. But a vodka, you're gonna do 90% plus, trying to get it as close to azeotrope as possible. Remember, ethanol is still a carrier of flavor, so you will get some semblance of the flavor carrying through, but not a lot. So try and get it from 90 and above. If you can get to 95%, great, and then you will strip away as much flavor as possible. That's why the commercial distillers, when they do vodka or a neutral grain spirit, they do distill it multiple times. The more you distill, the more you strip away flavor, and the less of that flavor will stay behind. So if you want to do a vodka, 90 plus, fruit is 60 to 80, whiskey is 60 to 90, and then of course if you want to do a gin, remember, gin start with a neutral base and then you work your way up from the neutral base. Now if you have any further questions, please once again always hit me up on an email or just put a comment down below. I'll see if I can get to those comments as fast as possible. If you like this kind of content, remember to hit that subscribe button, ring that little bell so you get notified the moment we upload something. If you want to know what that thing is bubbling at the back there, remember to hit that bell icon so you get notified immediately the moment I upload content and you don't miss a thing. And as always, have a lekker day.